All right, boom. We're on with Pete. First thing in the morning there for you, right?
Yeah, it's not too bad, mate. It's about 8:15 in the morning, so the morning coffee's going well so far, and great way to be able to start the day.
Evening coffee.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's my new challenge for the rest of the year is I want to try and talk to as many coaches as I can from countries that I have fucking no clue about soccer. So I now know that you are what 18 hours ahead of me, and found out today Pakistan is 10 hours ahead. So this is becoming a good geography lesson. Before we get started, I want to kick off with this. Did you get a name for this guy yet?
Oh man, I've got a few options. Look,
Do you want to explain this to everyone for everyone who's like, what's he fucking putting lizard pictures up from? Explain this.
Look, basically, the other day, just sitting here in my office, I had a tap at the window, and occasionally you get like a few bugs that fly into the door or window, whatever. Look down, and I've got a blue-tongued lizard just hanging out here, and I was just like, "All right, mate, what's going on?" And we're having a good old chat for a little bit, and then he walks off. Came back, put down a little bowl of water for him, and then he just sat there for a while, and I was just like, all right, mate, well, let's see if we can give you a nickname. And so kind of threw that up on Twitter.
How big is that thing? Like, it looks huge.
He was probably, I'm going to say about 40 centimeters. So, he was a decent size, man. It was a decent sized lizard.
Because the first time I looked at it, I'm like, that's a little thing. And I look at the body, I'm like, damn.
Nah, he's huge.
That'd drag my cat off. So I like, my favorite was, who had the one about Eden Gecko Hazard or something?
Yeah, Gecko Hazard. Yep. Yeah. Eden Gecko as well.
Eden Gecko. Yeah, you had a few good ones on that. So you're in, for those of us who have not come across you yet, you are in Sydney, Australia, right?
Yep, spot on.
And I got three. So you're a technical assistant for Australia deaf football. You're also assistant coach for blind football.
Correct.
And then coach at MacArthur Rams.
Yep.
All right. So I want to get straight into the deaf football and the blind football, if you don't mind, and then come to then I would like you to give me a bit of education on grassroots soccer and what clubs, and share that with everyone over here, what it looks like in Australia. But how did you get involved in deaf football and blind football?
Okay, so both of them actually, it was like 2018. I'd actually just quit my job as a high school teacher and was kind of scrolling through LinkedIn to try and find kind of a new job, and ended up coming across these posts from, our technical director from Deaf Football Australia, James Lambert. He had just posted up saying, hey, there's the training camp coming up out in Blacktown. And I immediately just sent him off a message, kind of being a little bit cheeky, saying, hey, can I just come down and watch? And that's all I kind of want to do, is just come down. I'll say hi, want to see what the heck the training session's like, that kind of stuff. And next thing you know, turn up at the training session.
No experience with this before that, right?
No experience. Thrown in the deep end. Turn up at the training session out in Blacktown, and he's basically just gone, okay, here's my session plan, and you go set up the fields, and I'll see you in about 5 minutes. I'm going to have a team talk with the players, so make sure it looks exactly what I want it to look like.
I guess he didn't understand the I want to come and watch part.
No, not at all. So
I like this guy already. Anyone shows any interest, let's put them to work straight away.
Yeah, so basically that was meant to be like a 20-minute me just turn up, watch a bit of the training session, then go home kind of style. I ended up staying for the full 3.5 hours of like the team meeting, the team lunch, the training session. Then I ended up doing the exact same on day 2 and day 3 of the training camps. And basically by the end of like day 3, he basically just said, okay, would you like to come on board as one of our assistant coaches? And then once we started talking, it kind of made sense that I kind of moved into that technical assistance role. So my job is basically help him to explain his football knowledge into simple enough language to be able to teach the players. So, you know, rather than having the complex ideas of, okay, we're going to play like a high pressing system, yada, 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 I try and simplify the models by creating like key messages or key sign language to be able to convey to players so that we can all explain what's going to happen at what moment.
What age are these players?
So our youngest player is 14 and our oldest player is 38.
And what kind of level of player are they?
Well, it depends. So we've got a few of our like younger players and a few of our kind of like our national team A team players who are at a decent standard. They play at kind of like that semi-professional level in like their local states, their local regions. Then you have a number of players who kind of play at that Premier League or just at like all age men's level in their local grassroots associations. So yeah, we've got kind of like that difference in levels, and it also compares on kind of the player by player basis because some of the players are profoundly deaf, and some of the players are hearing impaired. Some have implants, some have hearing aids. So every player is completely different in that way.
So so by the sound of it, like the challenge is trying to turn the coaches, like the technical nature of what you want to do into something that can actually be understood in their language. Like I suppose there's not, like, does the sign language exist for all of the kind of soccer terminology we would use and have, or like, is that where your job comes in to try and create this common language almost?
Yeah, exactly. So like we've got this amazing interpreter who comes along, Brett Knight. He comes along and he helps me with the sign language and trying to like work out what words are going to be best. So for instance, like, okay, put it in the context. If we wanted to play a 5-against-2 rondo, you explain that to your players and be like, all right, you got 5-against-2. Simple, go play. But in sign language, we're basically saying, all right, it's 5v2. We'll have one in the middle as a bouncer. So then we can actually like have an influence in there. We can talk about the fact that there'll be like 30-second rotations in terms of all of that as well. So that way, then it's not a transitional moment. It's defenders stay in for set periods of time. So yeah, we try and find what words look similar to bounce or what words might look similar to like middle, and we can try and influence it to make it more football specific.
But I suppose it's also like creating a language amongst the team that as you go forward, like this is what we use, right? We use this. That's what that means. It's kind of funny because it's something I've been kind of thinking about even with our young players is how do we, do we use words that maybe they understand, or do we just use soccer terms and try and teach them what that means? It's
a good challenge. So one of our
what's
rules,
some of the solutions you've come up with?
Yeah, so one of our camp rules or one of our solutions that we've had to come up with is when we turn up to a training session, everyone's hearing aids comes out or everyone's implant has to come off. So then everyone's on a level playing field. So that way then, you don't have profoundly deaf players who get one piece of information and then the hearing impaired players get a different piece of information. By everyone being on the same playing field, everyone gets the same information at the same time and we can communicate it in that same way. So that was one of our solutions that we came up with pretty quickly. It also ensures that we're more inclusive in that way then.
I suppose, yeah, if you've got, is that because if you have these different levels of hearing impairment that you would almost have to give the message in 3 different ways, maybe 4 different ways, depending on if the player cannot hear at all or if they can hear? I suppose, yeah, does that frustrate the players that are, what would you call, like, can hear a little bit or somewhat, or hearing impaired? Does that frustrate them, or is that kind of brought them in and made them more part of the team. And
yeah, look, we've tried to make sure that they're as part of the team as possible. We've, now when we turn up to training camps, one of the first sessions that we do is we basically have like an hour allocated for everyone to be able to learn some basic sign language. So that way, then we all have to communicate in the same format. I think that just means that those who are hearing impaired, who might not have used sign language before, they now suddenly think, okay, to be able to work with my teammates, it makes sense for us to be able to learn to talk together in the same language.
yeah.
So, we'll all stand around a whiteboard at a training session. We'll be like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we want it to look like. But it's up to you guys to try and communicate that and then to actually show us what it looks like.
Now, how do the players communicate with each other on the field when they're actually playing? What does that look like? Are they using these? Are they signing to each other, or?
Yeah. It depends. If the ball's out of play, you might get a window of opportunity to be actually able to communicate using a sign or like a keyword. You might get like a set piece where you've got a window of opportunity to actually talk to someone. Or a lot of the time you're kind of relying on what you've learned and what your instincts are. So obviously, with no hearing, you're relying a lot more on your vision, your awareness, knowing what's happening around you to be able to make the right decisions. So, at training sessions, we'll try and use more game scenarios as much as possible so that you get used to what the environments are and what the choices are in a game setting. So we have to make it as game realistic as possible.
Are there certain things, like working with these groups of players, Pete, is there certain skills that you see that this set of players maybe has more than players that can communicate through voice? Is there any specific things that these players do better or more?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it's kind of funny. You kind of think about the old school style of football of, 5 at the back and 5 at the front. You lump it forward and you hope for the best. That's kind of like your classic deaf football international team. That's pretty much how most teams will kind of play. There's not too many who are actually, your tactical play through thirds, build things up and that kind of stuff. So in a way, we're kind of going against the grain by wanting to play good football and get results. So,
so why is that? Why is that? Explain that to us, because I've never heard of that. Like, why would you have 5 at the back, 5 at the front, and how does school me on that? That's a unique concept.
Again, it makes the game a little bit easier with your vision and awareness if you've only basically got to lump it forward and hope for the best. And then it becomes, that physical battle of can you dominate the ball when you're in the front third. But for us, if we can realize that there are pockets of space that opposition teams aren't really using because they might play a short ball and then we can expose that, then we want to definitely try and do that as best as we can. So that's why we're willing to kind of take a risk and be a bit more possession based. We're willing to take a risk and be a little bit braver with the ball at our feet.
What are some of the challenges that these players have more so than players that can hear? I'm just because I've never even thought about this. I'm trying to think very quickly about this. I suppose you would have to do a lot more, I suppose, scanning, right, and looking around, and because you can't hear if someone's even behind you, right? Like
exactly.
And you're not getting any information from your teammates about how much time you have on the ball. Like,
put in perspective. Okay, so we had a game at the end of last year.
It's basically like youth soccer. They don't talk to each other.
Like, I had a game last year where all I needed to do was, because one of my central midfielders had to go off injured, I wanted my right back to come into the middle of the park and I wanted to sub on a new player. That took about 5 minutes because I'm trying to use sign language to scream out to players and get their attention and say, like, I want Angry to play here. And like, I want players to play in certain roles. And it just took so long. And then eventually when the ball went out of play, then we can kind of get everyone's attention and say, okay, this is what the message is. And it just makes things so tough. But at the same time, it makes it so incredibly rewarding and so enjoyable at the same time.
So you're kind of, you're bucking the trend then and going against this. We're going to make it easier because that's a simpler way to play. And your kind of philosophy is to try and play a more, play more the way we see other teams, even though that's going to be more difficult. Have you had more success with that, or are other teams who are still playing this other style? Is it hard to play against them?
Well, there's a lot of teams across the Asian continent who are kind of doing a similar thing to us. So because of that, we've had to adapt. And unfortunately, it means that like we haven't actually been able to play an international game or an international tournament for a number of years. Like we were meant to be able to be in Hong Kong last year, and that was because of the protests that we ended up having to cancel that trip. Then obviously this year we were meant to be at a tournament that ended up not happening. We've got a Deaf World Cup that we're hoping to have a wildcard entry in 2022. So, you know, with any luck in 2 years' time, we'll be able to head off for a tournament. But, you know, for now, we end up just playing against kind of local Premier League teams or local, like, all-age teams to be able to give ourselves some competition. And generally, we're playing against teams who are just a regular grassroots 18 to 24-year-old men's team type setup. So they're good challenges for us because our opposition can communicate really well. They can all hear instructions. They can tactically adapt. And it's kind of up to us how quickly we can identify problems and how quickly we can identify solutions.
Yeah, I suppose it's something that I certainly have never, until we started talking about not being able to communicate at all, you don't appreciate just how, like, I'm just thinking how important, like how much easier you can make the game for your teammates, right? And even just the coaches as well.
Yeah, exactly. You know, communication is absolutely everything, whether it's, you know, it's a simple thing of, I want to give you the ball and you'll call for it before you get the ball. Like, I know where you are on the field because you've yelled out for it. But, you know, deaf football, it doesn't always happen. Instead, like we say, we're relying on these game moments that we've taught. We're relying on these passing patterns or these little combinations and the vision awareness. That is absolutely key. And so, you know, I'm trying to work with older players who have previously been in the setup for a number of years and saying, look, we need to scan, we need to see what's around us before you get the ball. It's like, as a number 9, you don't want to have contact coming just behind you. You don't want to be getting absolutely clobbered. You actually want to, you know, check over your shoulder, try and hold them off, and then turn and like use them to be able to get past players. So, you know, reteaching kind of old habits or bringing in the next generation, it's really important to kind of emphasize these key points.
What's the number one kind of technical problem? Is it like, is there a lot of loss of possession through not being aware of surroundings, or what's the number one challenge you've got to overcome?
Yeah, it's pretty much that the game is so transitional. It is just super transitional. So you don't really have moments of, you know, finding a rhythm to the game where you can say, we've got the ball, we don't have the ball, let's like stay tight. Instead, the game is just basically got the ball, lost it, got the ball, lost it, got the ball, lost it. So we're like trying to teach the rhythm of a game and how to feel the flow of different games.
So are you trying to really develop players or find players that have an ability to keep the ball themselves?
Yeah, that'd be amazing. You know, players who are willing to be in, you know, comfortable in 1v1 situations, players who are comfortable to, you know, get the ball at their feet and do something with it, players who are happy to look for combinations. That's where the magic happens for sure.
Let's move on to blind football now, because that's
awesome.
That's good. So you decided to, did you get involved with blind football after the deaf football or at the same time?
It was about the same time. I replied to the same LinkedIn post, pretty much, where we had the national team coordinator, Dave Connolly, who posted on LinkedIn saying that there'd be a training camp up in Sydney. Same kind of thing. Sent him off a message to say, hey, can I just turn up and come watch? Turned up at the training session. There were 12 players and, the head coach, about 12 players, and our national team coordinator. And he basically just said to me, okay, Pete, here are your 6 players for warm-up. Igor, here are your 6 players for warm-up. We'll see you in about 15 minutes' time.
Didn't learn your lesson, did you, from the first time around?
No, definitely didn't. No. So,
maybe you were more prepared that it was going to happen this time.
Yeah, so basically a 15-minute
had you prepared for that at all?
No.
Like that you were going to... So what's going through your head when you're like, okay, here's 6. I've just been given 6 blind players. I've never worked with them in my life before. What did you do?
Well, the mental process is, okay, we've got to do warm-up. So warm-up for me is like, your FIFA 11 plus warm-up. So now I'm trying to work out, okay, what's the easiest way to kind of make your FIFA 11 plus warm-up actually work with 6 blind players? The way we kind of like made it work was I ended up finding one of like the parents of one of the players to stand, about 10 yards away from me. He had the ball in his hand. So the ball is got ball bearings in it, so you can hear it when it moves. I stood at the other end. The ball around and then run back to where my clap is. We'd get the next player to go, and we'd end up having cycles of run towards the ball, then turn and run back towards my clap. And we'd kind of go through your little cycle of different warm-up activations and that kind of stuff. But definitely didn't learn my lesson of getting thrown in the deep end.
I would have no clue what to do. They'd have been doing push-ups. How old are these players, Pete? The 12 players.
Our youngest player from memory is 18, and then the oldest player is 29.
And this is your national B team?
Yeah, so this is our national blind B1 football team. So these guys are classed as having kind of 90% to 100% of kind of lack of vision. And then when we are at training camps or when we're actually playing games, we end up putting kind of blackout goggles. They look a bit like ski goggles on, but they're kind of the same. They just black out every kind of piece of light. And we put on the blackout goggles, and that's how we kind of go to training and works from there.
Who, you put those on too?
Yeah, look, I have. It is a good laugh. It's not the easiest way to be able to coach wearing the blackout goggles, but it is a good bit of fun. I've taken it down to actually a few of like teams that I've personally worked with in the grassroots space, where I've taken them down and said, okay, guys, we're going to try a bit of blind soccer tonight. Put on the blindfolds, put on an audible ball, and we've tried to play some blind soccer. And it's hilarious watching, 15 and 16-year-old regular kids trying to play blind soccer for the first time in their lives. And they have the best time ever trying to do it.
So let's back up a step, and maybe you could give us a little sort of rundown or education on, like, because I know nothing. I only was just talking to someone earlier today. So I said, I'm talking to this Aussie guy today, and he's involved with blind soccer. And he said, the ball has like a bell or something in it so they can hear it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I've kind of seen some clips of blind soccer, but I'm like, my first thought was just watching it was like, how does it even work? Like, how is this even possible? And then, I ended up having a discussion with one of my coaches actually about, like, do you look at the ball when you kick it? And he says, he was of the opinion, he's like, no, I always look at the ball when I'm kicking it. And I said, well, I don't. When I pass the ball, I'm looking at the person where it's going. And then we put down some balls, and we were trying just like to kick it into a pug net that was maybe 20 yards away. And with our eyes closed, right? Just taking 2 or 3 steps back. It was brutal. It wasn't even, I was barely coming into contact with the ball. Right? I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. Ball's right there. All I got to do is take 3 steps. And no, it was like pure shank. So how does it all work? Like, how are they able to do what they do?
Okay, so let's just talk about the field setup and like what you need and how it all kind of works. So kind of think about it, you're playing on a futsal court, except we're outdoors. So we generally play kind of futsal court size field or 5-a-side type field. So it's kind of that 40 by 20 type of a space. You've kind of got futsal size goals. You play it like it's 5-a-side. So you'll have 4.
Why is the stupid question? Why is the field so much smaller, Pete? Doesn't that make it harder?
Yeah, so we play it on that 40 by 20 type space, that futsal size space, kind of because it is 5-a-side. We also have kickboards along either side of the field. So then that way the ball can't actually go out of play on either sideline. It can only actually go out behind the goals. So that's kind of how the ball gets played there. We also play on that way outdoors because, you know, if we're indoors, you'll get an echo. So we have to play outdoors to kind of help with the players' awareness. Simple thing, you know, if crowds turn up, crowds can't talk unless the ball's out of play. So that way then we get to help the players as much as possible.
This sounds like a great rule for grassroots soccer.
Yeah, I know. It's that yellow card for shouting type setup. If we could bring that in, that'd be great. Okay, so then we've got 4 on the court. We've got a goalkeeper. With your goalkeeper, they can either be vision impaired or they can be fully sighted. It's up to kind of every national team what they want to do, or every team. The technical box for a goalkeeper is kind of barely the size of your coffee table at home. It is incredibly small, so your goalkeeper doesn't actually have a whole lot of room to be able to move.
Why is that?
Well, you know, if you had a bigger space for the goalkeeper, then there's a window of opportunity for them to kind of be able to drive forward with the ball to kind of start more attacks. By having a smaller space, it encourages the players to kind of fill in more spaces on the field. Okay. So then, you know,
sorry. So there's no boards behind the goal lines, so it can go
correct.
out. The boards along the sidelines, are they right on the line?
Yes.
And is that just to try and help keep the ball in play, or like?
Yeah, look, it's got lots of purposes. So 1, it's to get the ball in play. 2, it's kind of like a handle that players could hold on to if they needed to as a reference point.
How high is it, Pete?
It's kind of about hip height. Okay. So, you know, about your hip height. That way then it's kind of like not too uncomfortable to kind of like reference point where it is. And it also means that, you know, when there's a free kick in the game, or if there's kind of like a drop ball type situation, the referee can either just shake the ball, throw it against the wall, and then that will start the play from there. So that way then you kind of got reference points all the way around the field.
All right, so boards down the side, nothing on the goal line, really small goalkeeper box or area. Yep. Okay. Is the soccer ball, what's that? Is it?
Okay, so the soccer ball is kind of like same size and same weight as a futsal ball. So it's quite heavy. It doesn't really bounce too much. And it does have kind of ball bearings in there. So you can hear it when it moves. So when you shake it, it rattles. When the ball is moving quite quickly, so if you played a decent pass forward, you wouldn't actually be able to hear the ball move too much because, you know, it's quite a direct ball. But if the ball was bouncing forward, you'd definitely be able to hear the bounce as it would like clock forward from there.
So what are some of the techniques that these players use to? I'm just trying to think like.
Okay, so think about it. How do you actually dribble a ball? How do you have the ball in your feet and you're dribbling? Okay, how do you kids that you coach, JJ? How do they dribble the ball? Well, like what
take a long way and then chase it.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, are you doing more like using the sole of their foot to keep it really close?
Yeah, so sometimes you use the sole of your foot so you can kind of like roll the ball where you want it to go. Another good technique is if you actually want to dribble, you actually kind of do duck feet and you kind of like shuffle the ball forward.
Oh, like foundation dribble inside of the
Because the
foot?
thing is, yeah. So if you can use like that duck feet model, if someone wanted to come in and try and steal the ball, it kind of gets jammed in the top of your heels. So then you actually kind of keep hold of the ball more and you can easily adapt where you want the ball to go to next.
Does the player who has the ball, do they ever kind of just manipulate the ball in front of them so that people can hear where it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And now you said if I was to play a pass, like a 10 or 15 yard pass, and I hit it along the ground, that you wouldn't hear it. Now, with that sounds like it'd be harder for the person receiving the ball.
It is. So this is where, you and I would need to communicate to work out where you are on the field and where I am with the ball at my feet. So then I know where I'm passing the ball to. So this is an international standard. Yeah. So internationally, we've got this magical word. The word is voy. So voy basically translates to I am here. So by everyone on the field saying voy, whether you're a defender, whether you're an attacker, whether you're on my team, whatever, everyone's kind of saying the word voy. So I need to know what your voice sounds like and I can guess how far away you are. So then I can assume what the pass is going to be and what kind of, I might say JJ actually needs the ball on the ground and he sounds like he's not too far away. So I'm going to play a pass in his direction and it's a close pass. But then, for instance, you might say, okay, Pete sounds like he's further away, so I need to do a longer kick. And to help me out, you're going to kick it so the ball actually bounces before he gets to me. So then I've got more reference points. Exactly.
Wow.
So mentally, the players are drained when we get to full time because mentally they've been listening so much to the information happening around them.
I just say that maybe is another skill these players must have to develop is kind of, do they shout for the ball? Like when they're saying this, was it voy?
Yes.
Surely how loud I shout that has to kind of be consistent, doesn't it? Otherwise, if I shout it really loudly, trying to figure out how far away someone is.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you got to work out how far away the ball is, and you also got to kind of listen out to where your opponent might be. So you might not have an opponent nearby because you can't hear anyone else nearby saying the word void. So you might say, okay, I guess that I'm in a lot of space. So, and I feel like the ball's away from me. So I'm going to call it void a little bit louder because I feel like I'm going to have more time and space to do something with it.
Surely the real difficulty must be if I've got the ball and you're shouting void, but there's a defender between us, he doesn't have to shout out, does he? Does he?
Not until as the ball's being kicked, then he might have to call out void to try and just make sure that he doesn't get a free kick against him for saying no void. So
you can't kind of just hide and say nothing and
spot on.
Okay, because I'm thinking if I was a sneaky defender and I'd be like, well, I know I'm in between these two, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and say nothing.
Exactly. So yeah. Then to add to the many voices.
How do they know where the goal is?
Yeah, so this is what happens. When you're in the defensive third, your goalkeeper is able to talk. So when the ball is in the defensive third, goalkeeper talks. When the ball is in the middle, correct. Okay. When the ball is in the middle third, me as a coach, I'm allowed to talk. Okay. When the ball is in the front third, our goal guide is allowed to talk. So we have a goal guide who stands behind the goal.
Is that a player or a coach?
Either. It could be a player, it could be a coach, it could be like a manager. It depends on what your role is.
Sorry, is that person on the field?
No, so they stand basically behind the goal.
All right,
and
so
their job is to help out where the goal is.
So when the ball's in our defensive third and we've got the ball, we're taking instruction from our goalkeeper.
Correct.
Now, is that why you said the goalkeeper can be sighted if you want?
Yes.
Does anybody play with a blind goalkeeper?
no one plays with a fully blind goalkeeper. Some national teams play with vision impaired goalkeepers,
Okay.
but most will play with a fully sighted goalkeeper.
Now it makes sense. I was like, that's a bit fucking cheeky, letting your
Yeah.
goalkeeper like be sighted, but he obviously needs to, he or she. And what kind of, all right, so ball in the defensive third, we're listening to our goalkeeper. In the middle third, we're listening to you.
Yep.
And then in the attacking third, we have someone behind the goal who's what instruction are those people giving? What are they? Is there rules on what you can give instruction on, what you can't give instruction on? Like, can the goalkeeper say, like, you're facing the wrong way, turn around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can he say, like, Pete's out wide, play it to him 45 degrees? Like, how?
Yep.
What is
absolutely.
it?
You can be as directive as you like with your information. You can be as clear as you like with the info. You can be as precise as you want, basically. There's kind of no real rule that restricts you.
Is there... It's funny because, I mean, the big thing with youth soccer, right, is we're trying to get away from joysticking players. But I suppose in this kind of soccer, they want you to, right? Or do they?
Yes.
Like,
so then we've got this goal guide whose job is basically to be able to tell you how far away you are from the goal and where you're most likely to be able to score. So I might be able to say to you, you're 8 steps away, 7 steps away, 6 steps away, bottom left corner, shoot.
Why? So back up one step to when we were talking about the players trying to figure out how far away they are from each. Why wouldn't they just let the coach tell them?
In which third are we talking?
Middle third.
Middle third, and you want the coach to be able to tell them how far away they are from each other?
Yeah, so I've got the ball. Like, why don't the players just rely on the coach to say, pass it to your left to Pete, he's 10 yards away?
Well, you could do.
You could?
Does
that just slow the game down, though, and take away from the players?
It kind of takes away the ownership from the players, and suddenly the ownership goes to the coach. The way that I'm trying to work with a blind football team is to kind of ensure that the players have as much ownership as possible. So they're making as many of the decisions as possible. So you end up having, more tactical advice from me, or you might have more substitutions from me and that kind of stuff.
So
rather than being instructive.
Okay, so give me some examples in the middle third. What are some of the things that you as the coach are giving players instruction on if it's not specific?
So I might be saying to one of our players nearby that, next time that you get the ball at your feet, they're actually playing in a 2-2 box. So try and drive towards the middle of the park, and then you'll actually have more space to be more creative. Or I might say to someone, okay, it's obvious that they're stopping you from being able to turn because they're blocking you. So use the wall to be able to turn and then explode forward. So I'm trying to give, more advice rather than being more instructive. And I'll give them more ideas to be able to say, okay, why don't you try this next time? See if it works.
2-2 box, is that just 2 defenders, 2 attackers, 2 backs?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, most national teams kind of play your classic futsal setups of either having 2 at the top, 2 at the back, or 3 at the back, 1 up top. Some teams might even play your 4 at the back and nothing up top, and then kind of really suck teams in. It really depends on that.
How long does the game last? Is it 2 halves of 30 minutes?
Yep.
Or yeah?
Yeah, 2 halves of about 25 minutes.
Rolling substitutes all the time?
Yeah, you can do a substitute basically when the ball's out of play. So you're kind of relying on either a corner or a goal kick to then be able to make your substitutes.
What else?
Go. Yeah, look, so we've talked about the field. We've talked about kind of like your coaching setup. We've talked about kind of like what your skills are, your dribbling, your 1v1s. Talked about your goal guides and in terms of what information that they're going to be able to provide. Again, you might get to a free kick or to a set piece of a corner even. and your goal guide's kind of relying on giving pockets of information. So, your goal guide can walk around. Generally, they've got, rather than being a pen, they might have like, a little steel rod or something like that. So they can tap the goal and let them know where the crossbar is, where the side post is, where the near post might be, and kind of be, tap a specific corner and say, okay, this is most likely where you're going to score. Get the ball here, going to score down this bottom corner. Then they have to stop, and they can only use their voice to be able to talk to players. So they can use this like little steel rod to be able to help during set pieces.
How long's blind soccer been going on? Like
Years. It's brilliant. And we've actually just been introduced last Paralympic Games into the Paralympics. So we're really starting to really grow, and there was plenty of hype around the Tokyo Games to really build things up from there.
Who's the best in the world at it?
Well, your best teams are kind of your Argentines, your Brazilians. There's a number of Eastern European teams who are incredibly strong. There's a lot of emerging nations who are really building their programs over in England, as well as across Poland, Switzerland, Sweden. They're really growing.
What makes the top teams the top teams? What makes them better?
Bravery in 1v1 situations and teams who are able to kind of dribble. So, this is where it's super important that people can dribble with the ball, that they can get the ball at their feet and kind of be, inventive with it. The best teams are the ones who are able to kind of penetrate through teams and be kind of sensational at set pieces. The teams who can kind of score from free kicks or corners.
Because I'm thinking, like, with the way you're describing it and thinking about the challenges, I'm thinking might be a fairly static game, right?
It definitely can be, yeah.
And be the best teams, and what you're saying is have players that are overcoming that, and it's not just I've got the ball, okay, let me listen around, who can I pass it to? But players that can actually take people on 1v1 and
exactly what we're trying to do in the grassroots space. Your youth development, or we want creative players to be able to go take on and be brave in situations. They're the teams who are successful in like blind football and vision impaired futsal and that kind of stuff. They're the teams who are willing to take risks. Like, don't stress too much about passing the ball around. Don't stress about trying to find combination play. Just get the ball at your feet, find a pocket of space, go and drive into that space and go create.
what are the biggest challenges you're obviously, I mean, communication is communication easier than the deaf football, but the technical side maybe is way harder. I'm thinking for the player, right? Like,
yeah, it can be. So for instance, like I might say to a player, okay, hold out your hands, and then we'll say, okay, if here is the field, then here's a goalkeeper at the back. This is you here at our first defender. And when you're getting that ball across, then you can actually then try and go into the middle and you can try and drive, and we can show things by using their hands, or we might be able to show things by using, their feet if they're more comfortable to communicate. Some players they just want the verbal. They just want to be able to spoken to, and they just want information that way. It depends obviously on the individual's approach. So, it's really, really key to have that communication model with individual players, so they kind of are welcoming and accepting, and they're able to kind of say, okay, I want information, this is how I want it, and this is how we're going to work things out.
Is there anything like that one coaching that one set of the deaf players has taught you about? Is there anything that's kind of crossed over between the two?
Yeah, so it's funny. Deaf football, I try and simplify messages. Blind football, I try and simplify message, but have more meaning behind those messages. So I try and, I don't want to be a joystick coach. I don't want to overcomplicate things by instructing, but I try and have more meaning behind the key words that I'm trying to say. in deaf football, I've got these big ideas and I want to simplify as well. So, you know, it's the same model. It's just the way it's conveyed and the way that I kind of explain things.
Very interesting. I'm gonna be YouTubing some deaf and blind soccer tonight for sure. I'll post
Brilliant. Awesome.
If you've got any links or clips, then send them to me. All right, let's. Anything else that you wanted to cover or teach us about on those two experiences or aspects?
Well, basically, my advice is if you ever get the window of opportunity, make sure you do get to go check out your national teams. I know that the US blind football scene is really starting to grow. I know that in Canada, there's a lot of programs starting up across, you know, different regions. Definitely across Europe, there's a whole lot of different blind football and deaf football programs, which are really starting to grow. And to be blunt, it's just a chance to be able to go check it out when you get the chance to be able to do it. And if you're a coach, kind of do a similar thing to me, send off a message and just be, okay, can I come down and just come watch and get thrown in the deep end like me, but just learn by just seeing it, because it is an amazing sport. Both of them are amazing sports. So it's worth taking the risk.
All right, so everyone get off your asses and go get involved. Go help out for a session or two. I'm sure you would learn a lot of new. I'm just thinking about it now. Like, you would definitely have to learn a lot of new techniques and sounds like a lot of patience.
Yeah,
which I'm sure would help you if you coach young kids, would be beneficial as well for some of us. Here's a rather broad question. So, what does youth soccer look like in Australia? So we're gonna switch and get a little bit of insight from you on what does. I find the more people I talk to in different countries, like, you'd think soccer would just look the same everywhere, but it doesn't. So what does youth soccer look like where you are?
Yeah, cool. So youth soccer, where I am. So for instance, where I live currently, I'm down in Wollongong, which is about an hour south of Sydney. So I'm out of kind of like that metro region. So where I am, it's kind of this growing community. There's a whole lot of like new suburbs being built. And so because of that, we have this kind of influx of players wanting to kind of start kicking a ball around. It's very much still that social interaction. It's very much a kick around with a lot of friends, but then you also have this big influences coming to, you know, plenty of people are saying, I feel like I'm missing out because little Johnny or little Jamie is doing X, and they get to do the X factor, or they get to do something that's a little bit different from kind of the norm. So, you know, anytime that players or young kids are coming up to me, even like, you know, up to the age of 12, saying, hey, we want to do some extra coaching, we want to do extra work, I'm like, yeah, cool, just go kick a ball in your backyard, mate. It's going to be better for you. So, you know,
you wouldn't last 10 minutes over here with that kind of attitude, Pete.
Yeah, I know. And admittedly, look, there's plenty of private coaches who are more than happy to take the money and do sessions like that. But for my mindset, it's just go learn by experimenting, go learn by trying stuff.
So what is the average, again, I know it's different, average soccer club, youth soccer club? How big is it where you are? How many are like, what's your population?
Oh, mate, it depends massively. So, for instance, the club that I grew up at, Bankstown RSL Dragons, was kind of like my local team. I
heard you guys spit fire.
Oh, mate, we were sensational. We even had like tubs of like tomato sauce at the barbecue, which was like colored green, and that was called dragon sauce. Oh, man, that was the best thing to be able to have on like a hot dog at the end of a game. So, you know, when I was playing for that team, we had about 6 or 7 junior teams, a few kind of like all-age men's teams, and a couple of women's teams. We were kind of like your average run-of-the-mill type of a club. And looking at how that team kind of went this year, they ended up actually folding because they didn't end up having enough teams for the 2020 or even the 2019 seasons. So they've ended up merging with another club. So, you know, it seems like there's probably in every region or every kind of like association, there's probably 7 or 8 teams who kind of dominate and have plenty of players. They might even have 2 or 3 teams in each age group. And then there's, you know, a few clubs who are kind of just hanging on by, you know, just a couple of tails, and that's about it.
So how many players do you reckon that club would have been back when you were there?
Back when I was there, you probably would have had, let's say, probably would have had close to about 200 kids, and then probably about 100 adults. That would have been kind of what our club would have been when I first signed up.
And is that small, medium?
Yeah, that'd be kind of like a smaller club. Compare that to, you know, one of the biggest and highest participation number clubs in that kind of same region who have close to, you know, 1,000 kids signed up, and they really start to dominate.
Is that kind of like the top end, 1,000?
Yeah, pretty much, because, you know, you might have more depending on where you are, what regions you are, and that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's funny, grassroots sport, it's kind of really localized. So we play very association based as a team. So your association might only be within a 30, maybe 20-minute drive from each other. And you might have 8 teams who are within that kind of radius. So you are quite a close-knit community. You kind of grow up playing against your best mates, and you meet up at high school and that kind of stuff. So there's a whole lot of associations within a really close proximity.
All right, we're going to get into that a little bit more because that's one of my questions. So how does a player, complete beginner, new player, what's their introduction to soccer look like in your regional area? Like, what age do they start? Typically, what's the program look like? Like, what do they go do? Is it do they start at 9 and join a team, or do they start in a program at 3 years old? How's that kind of?
Hopefully there's not too many 3-year-old programs around. Fingers crossed.
Okay, you wouldn't last 5.
Yeah.
Telling kids to go practice on their own and not taking 3-year-olds?
Yeah, sorry.
Visa denied.
So the way, because we're Australian, we like to have weird little nicknames for everything. So, you know, taking on that kangaroo model, our 6 to 9-year-old age group, they're called mini roos. So, you know, our mini roos model is kind of where most clubs kind of introduce a lot of players to the game. That's where we end up playing kind of that 4v4 type model. We play, you know, smaller size goals. It's kind of their introduction to that club scene. Some clubs will end up taking like your 5-year-olds and that kind of stuff, but generally 6 to 9 is where most clubs start to introduce younger players. And from then you actually start to grow, and you start to see your 9 to 12 being a 7v7 type of a game. Then you'll be able to see from generally under 13s up is when you end up playing your 11-a-sides.
And so for those, let's talk about 6-year-olds, the mini roos.
Yes.
So I got actually one of my
sensational name, isn't it?
One of my dog's names is Roo. So, so I'm a 6-year-old mini Roo joining my local soccer club. What happens to me? What do I get? What do they do with me? How many times a week do I come? What sort of coaches is there? Like, how long's the season? Walk me through what that 6-year-old's going to get in their first year.
Okay, so you turn up to your club, and generally you're going to get your jersey, your shorts, your socks. You're getting one of like the mums or the dads or an older brother or sister as one of your coaches. You end up getting, you know, so one of my jobs is I work for our state governing body, Football New South Wales. I'm one of the Grassroots and Community FC people. So I end up going out to plenty of grassroots clubs and running grassroots coaching certificates. So one of my things is to try and go out and help educate the mums and the dads, the brothers, the sisters, what a coaching session looks like and what resources are out there to be able to access. So that way then hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have too many teams who are treating their 6-year-olds like they're 22-year-old Premier League players and trying to teach them how to run laps and score goals from 40 yards out. And instead we're trying to teach them your foundational skills, your 1v1, how you strike a ball, how you defend in 1v1 situations, how you run with the ball at your feet and that kind of stuff, how you teach those foundational skills.
How often are you going out and doing that, Pete?
As much as I possibly can is kind of the answer to that. So
you're kind of like the club liaison for the association.
Yeah, so I work with a team of of casual staff. So amongst us, there's about 7 or 8 of us who get to go out into local communities and engage with as many people as possible. We get to run these grassroots coaching certificates or the mini ruse certificate as much as we can. More than happy when teams call up and say, hey, we need a bit of extra advice. We've got, 8 mini ruse teams and we've got a whole lot of coaches who 8 weeks into the season, they feel stuck and they don't really know what to do next because, our seasons might go for anywhere from, April till September. So it could be a decent season. It could be a shorter season. You could have, 20 weeks worth of training sessions. You might have a little bit more. So, our job is kind of to go out there and celebrate what they do and be like, bid the hype up and yeah, you guys are doing great work. Hey, let's try this and hopefully add a bit more enthusiasm.
Is that certification? Is that mandatory? Is it required for everyone or is it optional? And if so, how's it received? People
so
get to do it?
It's kind of recommended. I wouldn't say that it's compulsory to be able to do it, but it's definitely recommended. And the way that I see it is, I've tried to design this coaching module to basically be able to be taught in high schools to year 10 and year 9 students. So kids who are about that 15, 16-year-old age group. So with any luck over the next few years, I'll be able to get into as many high schools as I can, try and teach a whole lot of 15 and 16-year-olds, hey, this is what coaching should look like. And then with any luck, then when they're wanting to step into those coaching roles, or more realistically, when they're awkwardly standing there with a whole list of parents in front of them and the coach or the coordinator at the club says, the last parent to step backwards becomes the coach for the season, and they awkwardly go, oh crap, everyone else moved back and I didn't, then yeah, exactly. So hopefully
they will
by
do
that
the Homer
point,
Simpson into the bushes,
straight into the trees.
Yeah.
Hopefully then those types of people step forward and go, hey, you know what? I actually really want to do this, and they can just jump in.
So you're sort of going after more of the younger soccer player who's played, got some experience in the game, rather than going after the mum or dad who has to do it but has really very little interest or knowledge.
Spot on. That's kind of my mindset. And the reason why I really want that is, okay, no offense, but pretty much anyone who is kind of like my age group and older, you've kind of built up too many bad habits. Thanks. So I kind of don't want to teach those bad habits to the next generation. So instead, if I
the next course, Pete.
So hopefully then anyone who's that 15, 16-year-old age group, I can fix them before they get too much on the wrong course. And I can kind of go, hey, this is what coaching should look like.
Well, you also there's more longevity in that coach, right? You might get 20, 30, 40 years out of one of those 15-year-olds. Someone like me, you'll be lucky to get another 10. So,
mate, the way that you and I are both going, we might not have much hair left anyway, so we might be finishing.
That's why I'm going with the hat now. It's interesting because, I mean, that's it's something that I've been actively trying to do is work with. I find the hard part is the soccer part and the education part is actually the easy part with that group of people or players. What I'm finding the challenge is the, what would you call it? Like the skills of how to deal with kids and how to communicate with them and patience and also, you know, a big part is trying to help those young 15, 16-year-olds have some authority and presence, right? I find in the past I've been far too, I haven't thrown them in the deep end, honestly. I've kind of sheltered them and let them be the assistant for too long. So I find that's something that I've got to do a better job of, is giving them the tools and then just being like, here's your 12 kids, go.
Absolutely.
I'm
I don't
not
know how you
going
learned how to
to
coach.
take care of it for you.
Yeah, I don't know how you learned how to coach, but that's how I basically got thrown in the deep end. Is, you know, as you've heard, deaf football got thrown in the deep end, blind football got thrown in the deep
Yeah,
end
you're
when
not a
I
quick
started
learner,
coaching.
Pete.
Man, it's just like, you know, just go try stuff. And, you know, we're trying to teach kids that we want them to be able to make mistakes and that we want them to kind of learn from those mistakes. But at the same time, I feel like for us as coaches, we feel like everything needs to be perfect for us as coaches. It's like, no, screw that mindset. Let us make mistakes as well. Let us screw up and let us realize, okay, we've done something that didn't really work. So next time we're going to be better.
And I think with that, time will tell. But with that age group that we're talking about, I think they almost need to be thrown in the deep end, because I find that we tend to, I've had a few examples where they'll be quite happy, that 15, 16-year-old, just to move my cones for me and let me do it all.
Yeah, to be fair, like in a way, I kind of want to make myself redundant as a coach. In a way, that would be like the ideal situation, is that, you know, me as a coach, I actually don't need to be there anymore because I've got enough of the next generation coming through who are absolute legends, who have kind of, you know, learned what's going to be the best thing, have worked out what's going to work, have planned out what's going to be the best environment. And they've made these things work. And then suddenly, you know, made myself redundant and be like, okay, cool, happy days. Let's move on to the next challenge.
But I find, again, that age group for me is, I don't think that they tend to, if I'm running a session with them and I tell them, here, I want you to run this activity, they kind of they seem, I think it's that afraid to make a mistake part, right? Whereas when I walk away and just be like, off you go, and I go stand 30, 40 yards away, they do a far, you know, they're not perfect, but they do a far better job than if I stand right there. And it's almost like, I think they know I'm there, right? That I'll save them if need be. And then they never really figure it out. So yeah, it's an interesting approach. Like, I think you might be onto something there. How long have you put that into play yet, or just starting to put that into place?
Starting to put that into play at the moment. And we did our first kind of school group session probably about a month and a half ago now. So that was our first chance to kind of like test the waters and see what would be the environment like. So we ended up having 30 students who signed up to be able to do the certificate with us.
Nice.
I had myself and one of the other coaches come along and kind of run the session and help oversee the session. And, you know, now we've been able to talk to a few more high schools and really start the discussions and say, okay, well, this is what we can do. If you're interested, mate, here's your window of opportunity. Start booking in for next year, because this is when we really want to get things underway and start having a whole lot of fun with it.
Yeah, we ran a small course, and I had a couple of our, like, 2000. It was quite interesting. I had a group of parents and a few of our 2008 boys, so they're only like 12, 13. It was funny how quickly, or how quicker the young players got the concepts and the ideas of how to coach and what we were designing activities, and the parents really struggled with it. But I suppose that's because they've been through it, right? So we had parents drawing up line drills, and the kids were like, well, no, you're not allowed to do that. You can't have kids standing around, and you want to do it like this. It was quite but then the part they struggle with is actually communicating with so I think that's got to be something that maybe we need to add more of that part in. You probably already have that, but maybe more on not just the what we're going to coach, how we want to coach it, what we're trying to teach, but more of the how do you communicate and deal with this age group. There we go. I got that. I got my one great idea for the day. Is I'm gonna need to add that part. There needs to be a whole section on how to deal with young players.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is, we've all come across the little angry kid at the side of the field who just looks a bit annoyed and doesn't really want to participate, and you end up, there's plenty of coaches who have shouted at them and said, "Hey, come on, you're doing this now." Well, why not go up and have the rest of the group trying a different exercise? Maybe they're playing, your King of the Ring type game where they're trying to knock each other's ball out, or they're playing, a little match, and you just go over to the little one and you go, "Hey, mate, everything okay?" You might find out, they might not have had lunch today. They might, mum and dad might have had an argument on the car ride on the way to training. The kid might have, his pet fish might have died, or, anything could have set this kid off. Okay, put in perspective, last week I was working at a disability and inclusion little festival of football type thing. We had a few different sports there. I had a kid over at the side who wasn't super happy, a little bit annoyed. Went over to him like, "Hey mate, what's going on? What's happening?" He goes, "Oh, I want to ride the bicycles," because the next station they had different bicycles. He was like, "I want to ride some bicycles." I'm like, "Awesome, so do I." He's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to go ride some bicycles." And he's like, "Okay." Like, but first, we got to both score a goal. So when you and I both score a goal, then we're both going to go ride some bicycles. It was just like, "Oh, that's easy enough. Let's go score some goals then." So you get up, we both go score a goal, and then we both go over. We go ride some bicycles for like a minute or two. He's having the time of his life. And you know what? Happy days.
Yeah, I had a really good chat with coach called Corey about a lot of this stuff. He's a behavior specialist and works in schools, and I think those are some of that's some of the softer skills we talk about, right? I think you only even if you're a parent, like, you don't necessarily have those skills. It's something you learn over a long period of time. So he had a lot of good. If anyone wants ideas on that, listen to that podcast with Corey Reinhardt. Like, he had tons of, like, I think half the time we kind of look at it as a reflection of ourselves, right? With kids, with Grassroots, it's like, sometimes, like you said, it's they didn't have a lunch, or there's so many external factors going on. How much travel do kids have? Because
for God,
because over here, right, we always have the excuse of, well, Canada and the US is such a big country, and it's like, well, fuck me, Australia is pretty big too. So, do you have kids like flying, from Perth to Sydney to play games, or how's your kind of for youth players? What age would they start playing on a team, Pete, and playing other? Would they start at 6 years old, being on a little team and going to play another club, or what's your system look like for competition for young players?
Okay, so that's kind of where we have our little pyramid almost. So, we've got our grassroots at the bottom where you kind of play against your local teams and your local associations. And then, once you kind of get to that, even at 10, 11, 12, 13, once you want to play in that elite environment, you end up playing against other teams or other elite teams in your same kind of region. So, here down in Wollongong, we might play against a team who's an hour south down the road in Nowra, or we might play a team that's an hour north up in Sydney, but we're not doing a huge trip anywhere else across the country. Once you get to that 14, 15, 16 age group and you start really getting into that, semi-professional environment, then you end up playing against more greater distances. So, for instance, when here in Wollongong, our furthest game away is in Newcastle, which is about a 3.5 hour drive away. That's kind of our furthest travel time that we end up playing in our competition. Likewise, if you're in the division below, you've got kind of like a 2-hour drive west out to like Bathurst. You might have a 2.5 hour drive north to Gosford, and maybe like an hour and a bit drive south. That's about like kind of your distances. It's not a great deal, but that's kind of where it is. But that said, players who want to go to that environment, they basically do have to play for these elite clubs, and they have to play for these elite environments. So, there's a kid who lives right down on the border between New South Wales and Victoria in a town called Albury and Wodonga. Basically, it's this nice little hub between the two states. She goes to school down there on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday night, the family leave Albury and take an 8-hour drive up to Sydney. And she stays in Sydney, trains at the club on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday's like the day off. Sunday is when they play games, and then takes the 8-and-a-bit-hour drive back up down. So, she's probably the most full-on kid that you come across in that sense.
But for between the ages of 6 to 10, typically
you play against your local team. Absolute maximum would be an hour's drive away from each other.
And is there, at those age groups, does everyone just play in a local league, or do you have different levels of leagues? Like, can you buy into a higher level? Like, is there an elite league for 9-year-olds?
No, kind of that elite league will start at 10.
10.
Yeah, under 10 is kind of where it would start off. From that 6 to 9, that mini Roos type of age group, it's local teams only. So you're quite close to your local club. You're quite close to your local community.
And with those, what kind of format, like what would that look like for those kids? Do they play a straight up league, or do they just play friendly games, scores?
Yeah, so it's pretty much, it's friendly games. You're going to get your crazy parents who want to keep like your scores and create your own tables and that kind of stuff. But, whatever, who cares? The generic thing is, it's kind of like every Saturday morning, you generally have like an 8 a.m. game. Go down to the local park. You might play 2 or 3 games on a Saturday morning, and that's how they would play. You generally train once a week, maybe twice a week. So you might train on like a Tuesday night from 5 till 6:30 or 5 till 6. And then you've got your Saturday morning games.
And then once you get to like 10 plus, then it starts how does it change at that age?
So if you went to one of those elite environments, that's when you're going to start training twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. And that's when you start having your game on your Sundays, and it becomes kind of a more kind of elite environment in terms of, you're paying a lot more money because you are training a lot more. So you are there, like I say, generally it's 3 days a week, how you would be training.
And how do you become one of these? So it sounds like at that age, there's still your local league,
Yes.
For everyone. And then you have this league that's for the quote unquote better elite. How do you get into that environment, that league?
This is part of everyone's favorite thing.
I just put my team in there if I want?
No, this is part of the amazing thing of trials. And we want to try and identify elite players at a 10-year-old level. Yep. Fun times.
But as a club, so well, I guess my question wasn't about necessarily the players, Pete, but more about the teams that compete in those leagues.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get my team in there, or do I have to be at a certain? Is there certain clubs that are in, and that's all that's allowed in, or can I say no? I'm putting my team in from regular club or.
No, so kind of in the women's space where I generically coach a lot is in the women's space we have 12, 24, 30 teams. So we've got 30 clubs and they're the only clubs who are allowed in the 3 divisions. So that's it. You've basically got 30 clubs. Potentially you've got, let's say you're playing 9-a-side. You generally want to have 14 players, 30 by 14, that's how many players you basically got in this elite environment. So you can't just bring a random team in and say, look, we're going to compete into that competition because those clubs are already established in those leagues.
So what happens to the team that's like the whatever 9-year-old team that's phenomenal? All their players just disperse and go to these 30 clubs?
Correct.
How's that viewed? Is that embraced? Is there a lot of friction about that?
Absolutely. There's plenty of friction about it because, from a grassroots perspective, it's kind of that mindset of, you're taking our players, you're stealing our players. Like they worked so hard with us over the last 2 years, 3 years. They've grown up with us and you've just taken them. So there's kind of, there's some teams who give great recognition. So for instance, one of the groups that I work with at Sutherland Shire Association. So one of their first training sessions of the year is they always get kids turn up wearing the jerseys of wherever they've come from. And then they can celebrate and say, hey, well done to Como Janelli Soccer Club. You guys have been able to promote, 3 of your absolute legends from your under 9 age group and they've joined us. Or, well done to Connell's Point. You guys have 4 players who have joined us. Celebrate like crazy. So, there are certain associations who do this really well. And then there are some who just consider it, I'm stealing your best players. And because we're the elite environment, you guys need to be quiet and shut up about it kind of style.
How do you feel about that? Is that getting you in trouble?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I am a huge fan of, celebrate the teams who do things really well. And, these elite environments are not going to be for everyone. Sometimes it's better to be a big fish in a small pond rather than be, a small fish in a very, very big pond where your talent could be diluted. So you might have been an absolute superstar at your grassroots club at the age of 9, where you've scored your 80 goals in the season because you've been able to dribble past everyone. You go into an elite environment because everyone's thought, wow, this kid's really great. And suddenly they just go into their shell because suddenly they don't get the same level of success.
On the whole, let's say, are these so-called elite environments, are they far superior than this is where I have the problem with it. If all of these 30 elite clubs are far superior, then I can see the argument for it. But if they're not, then I think I have a huge problem with it, because I think it goes against the essence of what football's about. Football is about openness and opportunity for anyone who wants to prove themselves. And really, in the setup that you're describing, and we have it here too, I think it actually holds football back, because those 30 clubs do not have to put don't have to put as much effort into developing players, because they're just going to pick the best ones.
Yeah.
And that's where I got a fundamental, problem with it.
So I guess for me personally, I really enjoy kind of that part-time model whereby, You spend more time with your grassroots club. You spend more time with your local team, being amazing, having a whole lot of fun and really enjoying it. And then for those who kind of want to be pushed in a certain direction or are willing to kind of put in the extra work or whatever the model looks like, then you also get the window of opportunity to come into an elite environment where, you know what, it might be once a fortnight, you go into one of these teams and suddenly you get some extra training, and those types of environments are meant to be, you know, this is where we're saying, okay, this is the extra bit of development that might give you something special. So that part-time model for me personally makes more sense than having you're a rec team full-time, you're an elite team full-time, and you don't intermingle because God forbid we catch, you know, what the plebs have, for goodness sake. Like, it just makes no sense. Like it's so weird.
Especially at like 10 to 14 or 15 years old. Like, yeah, it's a big, and I mean, I can see arguments for both sides of it, but I think I find there's a lot of, the friction becomes when everybody is claiming that they're the best, right? And I think I don't know if in Australia it's the same as in Canada and the US. So that seems to be what it is. Like, there's certain gatekeepers that, you know, on the whole, I think it'd be more beneficial if everybody had to try equally hard to develop more players. And if if I'm one of these 30 clubs that has the automatic spot, I just scoop up the best players because there is no choice, right?
Yep, exactly.
Has anybody fought that and tried? Has anybody got a new team in there, or it's just the way it is?
Admittedly, you know, there's the window of opportunity for teams to be able to apply at the end of seasons and be able to say, hey, I want to state my case. But it's just a really tough window to kind of break into. So what ends up happening is, rather than being, you know, a club, what you might get is the association as a whole might say, okay, we'll put in a team as an association to represent everyone from our region. So then hopefully then we can actually be able to say, okay, from each club, we've got these legends, and then they go into these associations and represent an association. So they could potentially break the mold. So
explain this, what you just talked about there, because I think I understand you, this part-time model. Are you sort of saying that an alternative model that might be more beneficial for younger players is where typically they stay with their grassroots club? That's where they train, that's where they practice, they get the opportunity to play there. But then at the same time, a certain number of players that are ready or need a occasional challenge of playing other top or better players would then go play on teams at this elite level. It'd almost be like a bunch of like kind of regional teams. Is that kind of?
Yeah, look, to be honest, that's kind of what I would quite like to be able to see. I would be more than happy if we got to see, okay, every Saturday morning you had people go out and say, okay, all right, well, we've got a whole lot of 9 to 12-year-olds who are, or 9 to 13-year-olds who are absolute legends. They look like they need to be challenged. They need to be given, you know, a window of opportunity. So come into our environment for one day next week. There might be 60 kids who turn up. We take over an entire soccer field. You end up having, let's say, 6 different coaches. You'd kind of do that coach carousel model so you can learn from every different coach while you're there. You end up playing a whole lot of games at the end. So it's not just, you know, the best against the best. It's kind of this is good kids who work hard, who deserve to get some recognition for the stuff that they're doing, which is pretty amazing. And it could be a rotational basis. So it's not like, you know, every week it's going to be the best of the best. You know what? Why not just open up the doors and say, okay, the kids who, might need a bit of extra support. So your lower ability players potentially, let's welcome them in and let's just give them an entire day's worth of focus and let's celebrate them. Or, you know, that part-time model of being, you know, an extra help.
The elite clubs probably wouldn't like that much, would they?
No, they wouldn't, which is why that model probably won't happen. But my head would be cool.
What's your feelings on, especially with like younger, again, we're talking younger players, like, you know, under 14s, where what's your philosophy or thoughts on what we were talking about there, which I find a lot of coaches here have the philosophy that these better players will not develop, or in order for them to develop as better players, they've got to be playing with best of the best all the time.
Yeah, not a huge fan of that. I agree with it in terms of, you know, you want to play against some of the best players because it is a whole lot of fun to play against the best players. But at the same time, you know, it's actually really good fun to be super successful in different environments. So, you know, I might be a really good soccer player at the age of 10. So at the age of 10 competition, I might be absolutely having the time of my life. So for me, mentally and physically, I need to have that success. But then why not get the opportunity to fail and have to overcome challenges, but also playing in an under 11s competition or also playing in an under 12s competition where, you know, I'm against bigger, stronger, more mentally developed individuals potentially. So then I actually have to overcome some problems as well. So you get your reward, but then you also have to try and work out how to take some risks and how to really develop in different environments.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at that model of, you know, we've got to get the best kids with the best kids. And I think there's a couple of things that I've got a problem with that. Like, number one, I don't think it even holds up at the top level of the game. I was having this chat with someone the other day and I said, well, if that was the case, if you could only develop as one of the best players, then surely all the best players would be at the top 3 or 4 clubs. And take an example of someone like, you know, recently, the player that comes to mind for me is Jack Grealish from Aston Villa. Aston Villa are shit. Like they just got promoted. But he is by far one of the most exciting, best players I've seen for a long time. So surely if the argument is you can only develop to that level by being with the best players, then he'd have to be with Man City or Liverpool. And I think when you go down to younger kids, it's even more. Is the problem that we don't have enough? Because it sounds like what you're promoting, and I really like, is more flexibility, more ability to play in different environments. And it seems that what we've done with grassroots and youth soccer is we've cut that off and said, no, you're either going to be with best of the best all the time, or you're stuck here with grassroots and you're way too good for that. Is that the problem we have? Is we just don't create enough? We're not flexible enough to the player anymore?
Yeah, I think so for sure. You know, you talk about Jack Grealish. He's in the media at the moment as being told, you know, he's the next superstar for England and that, you know, England need to have more creative footballers. Makes sense because, you know, there's not enough creative footballers out there. You know, you could also compare to Wilf Zaha over at Crystal Palace, another guy who's been, you know, plenty of promotion about him. For me personally, the football system needs to be a lot more fluid. There needs to be that opportunity to, you know, go up and go down at different stages. So, okay, talking to a really good friend of mine who is in charge of like talent identification across our state and our region, the way that he describes talent ID and how he describes football and the model that we've kind of come up with is that it shouldn't be a pyramid. Instead, football should be like a jungle gym. whereby you can enter at different points, you can exit at different points, you can try different levels so that you can explore different moments. And that, you know, that's how we're going to get success. That's how we're going to get players to actually, you know, learn and challenge and risk things, is this jungle gym idea.
Well, I love your idea. Like, I'll be a big supporter of the model of stay with your grassroots club longer, where where you've grown up in your community, play more games locally, and then why don't we just from time to time get rid of this elite shit, really, just get rid of it and pluck out that top 15, 20% on a rolling basis as well. It doesn't have to be the same kids every month.
Absolutely.
And bring them together and give them, because the argument you always get, right, is, well, the elite clubs, they've got the highest, the best coaches and standards. Well, then make those coaches available through associations and bring, like you said, once a month, we're going to bring 60 kids together and give them that higher, supposedly, level of coaching, give them that higher level of competition. But guess what? The next month might be different 60 kids.
Yep.
If that's what's needed. And that way, I think you've got the, I think more of your grassroots clubs and coaches would go help, would buy into that, would promote that, right? Rather than having this protectionist model that we have, which is, I've been coaching this kid since he was 5 when he couldn't tie his shoelaces up. And now you're just going to take him away from our club, away from his mates. You're going to make him travel far more. And who even knows if that environment's going to be right for him, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. We need to stop this. It's me versus you. And then the player's stuck in the middle. It shouldn't be that. It's us together. Like, we're all trying to work to make sure that we make good humans, but 2, that the good humans are able to play some football at the same time. Like, it's us together on this journey.
And I think if you had more grassroots teams staying together and you could get people working together, then another really simple way, like I think you mentioned earlier, right, of giving those legends or those really good kids a challenge is let them go play up a week. Instead of forcing them to play up a team for the whole season, right? And maybe that kid goes, maybe it's a bit too difficult for them and they end up having an awful year. Let them go do it once or twice, right? And then bring them back to their home environment. That's to me is the simplest and cheapest way to give any player a challenge that they need.
And to be honest, even rather than just looking up, maybe there's going to be a week where the kid actually needs to go down a level and then just go try something new. So you might have set a new challenge and said, hey, this week you're going to try and do a bit more 1v1. I want you to try and take on some players. So only step down an age group. You're a 10-year-old, go play in the under 9s game for just 1 week. Try and work in your 1v1s and try and take on some players.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've gone, I've got more bravery because I can see when to do it or how to do it.
We just don't seem to be able to do that, though, do we?
No.
Like, because the typical argument is always, that I always hear on that subject is, well, yeah, but coaches will play the older kids down to win games. And it's like, well, for fuck's sake, then why don't we solve that problem? That's not a kid's problem. That's an adult problem. So why don't we actually go fix that problem? Because there are, like you said, I've got many kids that need to play a year their December birthday. Like, do you know what I mean? And like they need that environment where they can have some success. And that's just what they would benefit from occasionally. But we seem to, we just don't seem to be able to do what's best for the player many times.
Yeah. Well, okay. So think about it from, your top of the top type environment. Okay. You've got, let's say, an English Premier League player. He's low on confidence. He needs to find the back of the net because he hasn't scored a goal in the last 6 games. So he goes down and plays a reserve grade fixture plays 30 minutes in the reserves on the Saturday afternoon, ends up scoring 2 goals and feels the best person in the world. So, you know, if we could do it at the absolute top of the top, where you've got these elite players who are more than happy to take a
Why
step
can't we
down
do it
for
with
a
a
moment,
10-year-old?
why can't we do it with the youngest age group?
Yeah, I think we get in our own way, and we don't seem to want to fix the real problems, right? So if you have a coach that's putting a 10-year-old on a 9-year-old team to win the game, then that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what the kind of flexibility that we're looking for, right? But we don't seem to want to go fix that. We want to seem to just be like, well, absolutely, one asshole did that, so we can't do that anymore.
I actually had a parent come up and have a go at me the other week at a futsal game because I had a 15-year-old girl sitting on the bench for our under 13s game. And the reason why I had that was because there's one of the girls in the under 13s whose absolute hero is the 15-year-old kid. So for 5 minutes on the court, we had the 15 and 13-year-old play with each other on the same field. And the 13-year-old came off at halftime and was like, I feel amazing. I just did this. I tried this. And it was so amazing. At halftime, a parent from the opposition came across and was just like, what are you doing? That's not right. I don't think that's fair to be rotating players. Look, they're registered for the different team. I'm like, tell you what, mate, they get stuffed.
Yeah, it's not like she scored 6 goals in 5 minutes.
No.
So
because it makes no sense. You're doing it for a reward and to help out, like, you know, your next generation. The 15-year-old has become kind of like a coach to this 13-year-old age group and is seen as a mentor.
I tell you what, when my kids are out on the street playing with the neighbours who are 2 years older, I run in and drag them in straight away. I'm like,
absolutely, mate. Scruff of the neck, not allowed.
Yeah,
no.
It is. So what's your role at? Because it sounds like you've got more shit going on even than I do, with blind soccer, deaf soccer, coaching courses. What's your role at MacArthur Rams?
So there I am a reserve grade coach. So I'm considered like our reserve grade is kind of like our under 20s type age group. Okay. But we class it as a reserve grade because, you know, we see it as a fluid model whereby if a 17 or a kid from the under 16s is playing really well, come train with us. If there's a person in our first grade squad who needs a big confidence boost, come play for us in reserve grade. Like, I've got a squad of about 18 players in my reserve grade at the moment. So that way then players can go play up in first grade when they do really well. Players, if they need to, they've got the opportunity to get plenty of minutes in our reserve grade squad. So that's part of my model and what my role is there.
What's first grade? Is that your women's like senior team? Like
yes, correct.
Top team? So yep. You're the reserve manager. And it's women you coach, right?
Correct.
How often does that happen within your club where you're bringing up players from the younger age group to come train and play with you? And how often does it happen from the first team down?
So from our perspective, currently once a fortnight, we get the opportunity to get some 17s to come up to us. It might be someone needs a really big confidence boost and they've been training really well. They might have played them really well. You know, on a weekend, you might have had someone scored 4 goals and they're absolutely buzzing because they scored 4 goals in the 17s game. Well, come sit on the bench and see what it's like in a senior game and be part of this setup. In terms of kind of that relationship between our reserve team and our first team, we currently are training together. We've got 32 players on our roster as a full squad. So we train together as a squad. And then obviously there'll be moments where we need to separate because first grade might want to do one thing and reserve grade, we might want to do something slightly different, or we might want to kind of replicate the ideas, but we do train together as much as we possibly can.
And at your club, what age does it go down to?
So our youngest team is our under 10s. So basically, we've got.
Oh,
We've
you're
got
one of
what's
those
called,
elite clubs, aren't you?
Yeah, so we're called, so our 10s, 11s, 12s, and 13s, they're part of our skill acquisition phase. So
Shouldn't
it's
they have
classed,
acquired the skill by then?
yeah, hopefully. My version is I prefer to call it skill adaptation phase, but everyone hasn't really caught on to that model yet. So then in our New South Wales competition, we've got 14s, 15s, 17s, reserve grade, first grade. They're the 5 teams. We all play together on the Sundays. It starts at 8:30 for the under 14s and it goes until 3 p.m. for our first grade. So realistically, you could stay and watch all 5 grades play against the same club on the days.
Is your club entirely just girls, women?
So our side of the club is yes.
Yep.
So at MacArthur Rams, we also have the men's side of the club.
Yeah,
but yeah, just
are those two sides ever? Do you integrate at all?
Admittedly, no, we don't. We share the same training venues. We share the same facilities and that kind of stuff. But there isn't a lot of integration between the two currently. It is something that we're looking to kind of implement in the future. But at the moment, it's still fairly early days that, I've just signed on to that club. Our first grade coach has just signed on to the club. Our club technical director has just kind of moved into that role. So we're still kind of finding our feet. And once we've got kind of our feet planted on the ground, then we'll be able to kind of work out a bit more with the men's side of the club as well.
What the younger girls you have, like 10s, 11s, 12s, how do you have any of your senior women players working with those kids? Like coaching, training, like is there any?
At the moment, the answer is no.
But it's going to happen, right?
But it will be happening. So part of my role is those senior players in the squad, they will be getting their coaching certificates. It'll be part of kind of their football education. They'll be getting some football qualification. And then there will be kind of a rotational basis at the start to work out who wants to work out with which team. And there'll be potentially 2 players with each age group, rotate through. It might be once a week at training that they get to turn up. It might be that they turn up on a game day and get to see the players. But we'll work out a model that's going to suit him best because, again, realistically, the dream would be, I don't really want the mums or the dads kind of coaching at that age group. I'd love it if it was our reserve grade and first grade players working with our 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And then we've kind of got, senior players developing the next generation coming through.
Yeah, I think that'd be like very beneficial to the younger girls for sure, right?
Yeah, if nothing else, you kind of see who are the heroes, and you kind of have like that big sister type of a model of someone that you can kind of trust, someone that you can rely upon. And the added bonus is then you can start talking about what your club values, what your club culture is, and suddenly it starts getting implemented at a younger age, and you can really foster that love of a club rather than saying, oh, I'm going to play at a club for 1 year and then I'll shop around and find a new club to be at. Hopefully then more people kind of think about these like the elite or the semi-pro environments is this is where you can actually develop a person rather than this is where you're going to turn up for a season and then shop around next year for a better club.
So at the moment, and you're working mainly all the players you're working with are probably like 17 and older between your 3. What is so thinking about, like, again, my wheelhouse is like younger. What's really good about soccer in Australia, and what you see what they're doing for grassroots or junior younger players? Is there anything that you see that is different in Australia that you would say to someone in Canada, US, or like, you guys should be doing this as well. This is something that we do well.
Well, I guess for probably the last, I'm going to give a shout and say probably the last 10 years, it's been very much grassroots clubs, you stay in your place. Representative teams, you stay in your place. And then the elite teams, you stay in your place. And it was very segregated in that way. Even at the state governing body, it was very much, we're at the top, just shut up and listen to us kind of style. Like, it was an odd setup. But thankfully, across probably the last 12 months or so, you know, the guys at the top, our governing body, has started actually integrating better with grassroots, have started integrating better with our representative teams. You've got a better connection. So probably in the last 12 months, you know, people have actually started to have discussions and started to interact with different communities. You've been able to get, you know, a better connection between individuals, and suddenly grassroots is a more welcoming environment, I feel. So when I turn up wearing some of the work clothes or some of the state governing body clothes, it might be one of my representative team clothes, I don't feel like it's, oh, here is this person that we probably shouldn't be talking to because they're going to steal all our players. It's suddenly, oh crap, now I've got like a load of questions. Hey, what do you suggest with this? And what would be the way you deal with this problem? Or, hey, this is what we're doing. Is it kind of like the right thing that we should be doing, or should we be doing something different? And people are just way more accepting and way more open at the moment.
So you starting to see a little bit more collaboration between the...
Yeah, absolutely. It does help that a lot of the grassroots and the local teams, they've got a lot of support from local governments to improve their facilities and really upgrade their venues. So because of that, in kind of like a really interesting way, a lot of the elite teams have kind of gone, oh, you're getting support, but we're not getting support. Maybe we should talk to you because you obviously know the right way to go about things. So it's actually kind of forced a lot of these elite environments to have to start communicating.
Do any of these elite environment or these elite clubs, like, do any of them have programs for kids under, what is it, like the 10? You said at about 10 years old, they start in that. Do they have or run anything for kids below there, or they just leave that all to grassroots clubs and then have a tryout and take the top kids, or are any of them running programs to develop their own players internally?
Yeah, some will. Some clubs do. Some will have kind of like a good little, you know, it might be a Wednesday night and it's just like, hey, come down on a Wednesday night. We can teach you some skills. We play some games and that kind of stuff. So that might be kind of like an additional extra to like their training or whatever. So they might do.
But they don't have teams at those younger ages because...
Generically, no. Most won't.
So the typical majority then, the model is join grassroots club, play local, play other teams. When you get to 10, go to tryout if that's what you want to do. Get selected by the elite team. Bye-bye grassroots club. I'm off to them now.
Yep.
More travel, more. So it's not wholly unlike what we have here.
Exactly.
What did you think? I saw an article that I think the guy's name is Sam Blackburn. He's a Kiwi. He posted, and I read about some fairly substantial changes that New Zealand soccer is making to their like their whole structure. Did you see anything about that? Is it?
I have. Obviously, New Zealand's population is a lot smaller than what we have across Australia. They're probably the same size as one of our states. So it is a lot smaller of an environment. So in a way, it'd be easier to make changes across New Zealand. Plus, they have a really good connection between the governing body and their kind of like network of clubs who can then pass messages down the line. So I feel like in New Zealand, it is kind of a more accepting environment to welcome these changes.
Yeah, I looked. I didn't quite understand all of them, but it sounded good. Sounded positive. What other on the flip side of the coin, what do you feel, or what do you wish that you would do, or clubs would do better at the grassroots level in Australia to develop, to have maybe a better standard of player by the time they get to that 10, 11-year-old level? What do you need? What do you need to do better?
To stop treating little kids like they're adults. That would help. Treat little kids like they are the kids who are learning. Treat them like, they're meant to make mistakes, accept the fact that they're going to be challenged in different games. Give them opportunities to really grow and develop and enjoy that. They're meant to love the game. They're meant to be having fun at training sessions. Kids who are laughing, smiling, enjoying themselves. Put in perspective, playing a game of bull rush. Your classic game of start on one side, run to the other side, and try to not get tipped by the person in the middle. I ran a game with a group of 9-year-olds the other week who decided rather than running from one side to the other, they wanted to do cartwheels from one side to the other. You know what? I was having the best time of my life because they were enjoying themselves. They came up with the adaptation of that. They brought in the rule that the person who was the tipper could only tip you when you were on both feet. So if you had your hands on the ground, they couldn't tip you.
How's that teach physical literacy? I want to be able to tip someone when they're upside down, Pete.
Exactly. So, whole lot of fun with that. The whole point is, if everyone's having fun, everyone looks like they're staying safe, if everyone is involved and they're inclusive, then you know what? Your training session is pretty amazing.
Yeah. We have a lot of debate over here, as I'm sure you're aware, about pay to play and the cost for, what's the cost like for a kid to play soccer in Australia, like in your area? What would it cost for that? What does it cost me to get my kid into the little roos? And then how much does it cost when he's an elite roo?
So if you're starting off at that like 6 to 9 age group, there's plenty of clubs where registration is about $100. But thankfully, there is a active kids voucher that the government have been able to put out. So that's actually a $100 voucher. So you could have a kid who's registered to be able to play and not have to pay a single cent. So that to me is pretty amazing.
That's something you're doing well.
Yeah. Once he starts getting into,
How long's that season go, Pete? Is it a year-round thing or 6 months?
So your active kids vouchers, you generally would get 4 of those. So 4 different sports you'd be able to play across the year. So you could have a kid who gets an active kids voucher to be able to pay $100 for like a basketball season in September to December. And then you might play cricket that's December to, let's say, March. Then you play soccer from April till September. And potentially, let's say you've got one voucher that you've got readily available. So when the school holiday comes around and your kid's at home, you might be saying, hey, let's go. There's a soccer clinic down the road that Sydney FC is running. It's $120 to be able to register. You get $100 for a voucher. So suddenly it's $25 to be able to sign up for like 4 days worth of soccer. And suddenly things look okay.
So typically the soccer season for those little kids is about 6 months?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then when I jump up, because my little Roo is very, very elite at 10 years old, and she makes one of the elite 30 clubs. How long's my season go then? And how far does my $100 voucher go towards that?
Yeah, your $100 voucher is not going to go very far, to be honest. If you're in the men's side of the club or the boys' side of the club, you can pay anywhere from kind of $1,700 to kind of $2,000 for a season, depending on where you are. If you're in the girls' side of the club, it's generally anywhere from like $1,700 to about $1,900. Generally, there's kind of a cap that kind of stops the amount of money that's being paid for registrations. And then you've obviously got, some clubs who add on some extras onto the registration costs, like canteen fees or, your
Where's all that?
additional extra.
Where's the cost involved in? Is it facilities, coaching? Is it the league fees? And like, why? Where's that large jump come from? Is it paid professional coaches at all of these clubs?
Yeah, basically from that, there's a small amount of money which would go to the Australian governing body. So Football Australia will get a small pocket of money from every single registered participant. Your state governing body will take a small amount of money as well. Your club would then take a small amount of money. Then you've got kind of your registration fees, your match fees, you're paying for referees on weekends. You might be paying for your coaches as well. Plus then you've got all your gear. So in most elite environments, you're getting a home jersey, a training jersey, a jacket, bags, wet weather jacket. You get your tracksuit pants, and you get all your usual kind of full-on stuff, which, to be fair, if you're staying at the same club, do you really need new gear every single year?
Are those fees, do you see that in similar like for like in your other sports, in rugby, cricket, or is it?
Look, it is kind of, I would say soccer is a bit more expensive. Once you kind of break it down, okay, so if I'm a parent registering my kid today to play and it is $1,700 to be able to register, okay, but you break it down, you say, well, you've actually got 22 games that you're going to play in a season, plus you're going to play, let's say, 5 preseason games, and you've got 3 training sessions a week. So once you start to break down the cost of all of that, plus you've got all your gear and everything on top, like cost effectively, it's not too much of a high amount. So let's say, okay, so add it in again.
Will that season go longer now, Pete? It'll be longer than 6 months?
It will generally go for 7 months, maybe 8 months of the year. So you might have your preseason games in February or March, and then you're still going to finish around about September, October at the latest.
Okay. So you have a similar issue that we have when it comes to pay to play.
Absolutely. If you don't have the money, then you probably can't afford to register. Thankfully, there's a few clubs who have some really good environments whereby they're able to say, you could pay small amounts of like installments. There are some clubs who have sponsors on board who can help, pay the registration fees for individuals who might not be able to pay. From memory, there is one club in the elite environment across all of New South Wales, the state that I am, who have 0 registration fee as their amount because they have so many sponsors on board that they don't feel a need to charge the players or the parents anything.
Tell you what, though, that voucher scheme you've got at the grassroots level sounds phenomenal.
It is.
Do you have is soccer a very high? Do you have a lot of registration, a lot of players, or what's the?
Yeah, so it's the highest participated sport.
Is it the highest participation, and then cricket, and then rugby?
Yeah, so it's pretty much your highest participation sport in Australia is soccer. Then you kind of go down into your other sports, like you say, your rugby league, your cricket, your basketball, and then you kind of go down into, your tennis, your rugby unions and that kind of stuff. Your AFL is incredibly high. So AFL is probably your second or even your third most participated sport as well.
People actually want to play that?
Mate, AFL is sensational. I know that I've spent summer seasons, rather than playing futsal or indoor soccer, I've gone off and played AFL in a smaller version, AFL 9s, where you got 9 people on your team. It is brilliant fun.
No, that and Gaelic football. That's the two sports you wouldn't get me out on the pitch for. I'm a bit of a wuss when it comes to that, though. We'll have to when we post this, we'll post a link to some AFL highlights so people can see what we're talking about. So no, that's great. I mean, if you're making grassroots soccer nearly, I mean, very low cost, right? I mean, once you add in that voucher, and then add in your plan for training up all these young high school kids that have had some soccer experience and getting them in charge. Looks like things are a lot more collaboration between the levels. Sounds like you're on the road back to the World Cup, mate.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Like, if nothing else, the mindset should be that there are so many avenues for individuals to be able to come into sport. You know, you might not want to be a coach. You might want to be a referee. You might want to be an administrator. You might want to be, you know, a media person. You might want to be your club president who oversees a bit of everything. There's so many avenues. That's part of what I want to kind of showcase. Is there's so many different aspects of the game that you need to think as holistically as possible for everyone to be able to enjoy it.
Now, what's your, like, do you have promotion relegation in your professional leagues there?
So our top tier, our A-League and our W-League seasons, no, there is no promotional relegation between the top tier to the next levels.
How many, is that just due to the number of teams I would have thought, how many teams are there at the top level?
So in our A-League, we have 12 teams. In our Women's League, we've got 9 teams.
Okay. And I suppose one of the challenges has got to be geography, right? Like the sheer
Absolutely
size
so
of the country is.
If we're in Sydney and we wanted to play across in Perth, it could be an 8-hour flight to get to the other side of the country.
I think that's part of the problem that Canada's going to face with its CPL. Is just the size of the country is. You'd almost have to regionalize it. But what's the nearest? Who's your A-League team then, Pete?
So I've been a Sydney FC member for a number of years. So Sydney FC is kind of where my love and devotion falls towards for the A-League and the W-League.
Okay. And what kind of, how many people, what attendance would you get at those games?
For W-League games, we can get anywhere between kind of 1,000 to kind of 2,500, 3,000, depending on who we're playing against. So it's a decent enough little crowd. That said, we've been able to have some fixtures which have had close to 14,000 when it comes to, you know, your finals games or your big derbies as well. There's also a really good model whereby there are some W-League games which are played before a men's A-League game. So
that just makes complete sense.
Yep.
Like, and what would you get for the men's games?
Men's games, you'll generally get anywhere between your 6,500 to kind of 14,000. It can range drastically based on where you are and who you're playing against.
Yeah. Any plans for promotion relegation there, or just not enough teams at this point?
Look, it would be nice. And to be honest, part of the Asian Football Confederation's rules are that we need to be looking to implement that before 2030. So, you know, it'll become kind of a necessity at some point soon. Likewise, there's a lot of conversation going on at the moment about having a second division across Australia. So, you know, similar to that MLS and USL type of a relationship of having that top division and a second tier of teams who could be promoted from USL into MLS, or potentially having second teams from MLS playing in like your Timbers 2 playing in USL. Right. There will be kind of like that concept here in Australia with the national second division as well soon.
And are you football still? Are you still fully going ahead? Like, how's your lovely coronavirus situation?
Well, we actually got word late yesterday afternoon that fans will be allowed to come back to stadiums in full force. So, we've done quite well with how Australia's kind of managed, especially in New South Wales. We've gone 28 days with 0 cases, and things are looking really good for us. So yeah, it looks like sport's going ahead. Travel between states is going ahead for now. Our competition kicks off on the 27th of December, which is perfect for us. It means that we've got kind of enough time between now and when the season does kick off to, maintain this level of where we're at to ensure that everyone is as safe as possible.
And the fires are good for now?
Thankfully, let's see, I don't think that there's any active bushfires around in Australia at the moment, or at least in New South Wales.
Because everyone thinks they had a bad year with coronavirus, and then I always think of poor Australia with your fires on top of it. Like,
yeah, at the moment, the nearest fires to us, we've got a couple down in Canberra where they're doing just kind of your grassroots hazard reduction burns. They're nothing too major. There's a few. There's one bushfire which is about 1,000 hectares, about 4 hours north, up past Newcastle. It's mainly hazard reduction.
That's just a little one, though, right, Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're mainly hazard reductions.
Little one.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. It's nothing too major for now.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can get your season kicked off on the 27th. Let's hope we can get is it the Deaf World Cup next year?
With any luck, we'll be able to play some international games, both men's and women's, for deaf and women, and for blind football as well. So, yeah, loads of exciting things coming up for 2021, hopefully, if all goes to plan.
Yeah, let's put 2020 in the bin and just move on. So, Pete.
Well, admittedly, I thought the world was going to end when Fulham won their second game of the Premier League season. So, anything's possible.
Yeah, that was a sign of the apocalypse. Who is that? Is that your team you follow in England?
No, admittedly, thanks to the Aussie connection, Liverpool became the team that I started supporting, with the likes of Robbie Slater, Craig Johnson, Harry Kewell, having all played for Liverpool. That kind of.
You can't be old enough to remember Craig Johnston, can you? Like,
Craig Johnson, what an absolute champion of a guy. He came out to Australia and started promoting his way of coaching as well.
Best perm ever.
Absolutely.
He was a cracking player. I've forgotten about him. Harry Kewell would have been the one I remember the most. But yeah, Craig Johnson. That was my era. So, all right. Well, who we got this weekend? Liverpool are playing. Couldn't get past Brighton, which was kind of sad, but we'll see.
That's right. Liverpool are playing Wolves this week, so it'll be the return of Diogo Jota to haunt Wolves, it looks like.
Yeah. What time do you have to? Oh God, yeah, it must 12 o'clock game. That means you're.
12 o'clock game means it will be kicking off 6 a.m. here in Australia. So thankfully, I can watch that with the morning coffee.
There you go, and then get to some training. So
absolutely,
Pete, thank you for your time and schooling me on deaf football, blind football, the state of football and grassroots in Australia, bushfires, blue lizards, blue head lizards.
Yeah, blue tongue lizards.
Blue tongue. So I got nothing that exciting outside my back window. So Pete will sign off for today. What you got for the rest of the day? You off to any training today at all?
Yeah, we've got a training session tonight with Macarthur Rams under 15s team to look forward to with their coach away. Means I get to enjoy their session. And then tomorrow is basically a day full of futsal. So I'm looking forward to that. I think I've got 6 games that I'm coaching in tomorrow. So looking forward to have some fun there.
Cool. All right. Well, next time around, let's talk about futsal. Your experiences there, and also I'll give you the heads up now. So for next time, I want you to imagine you're trapped on a desert island and you're only allowed to coach 3 activities ever again. And we're just going to keep flying in new 7 to 9-year-olds for you. So I want you to think about what your favorite 3 activities would be to coach.
Easy. I've got one right away.
Go for it.
We're playing Rob the Nest. We're playing Rob the Nest, Hungry Hippos, man.
Rob the Nest, Hungry. Go on, and what does that look like?
Hungry Hippos, mate. We got 4 different teams. We've got a whole lot of footballs in the middle. And, one person comes out, collects a football from the middle, takes back to their team. When there's no soccer balls left in the middle, you can go steal from other groups. And there'll be a countdown. Whoever has the most soccer balls at the end wins. So you can change that as many times as you like. You can bring in different ball mastery skills. You can make it that you can, dribble only using 1 foot. You can make it whatever rule that you wanted to. Rob the Nest and Hungry Hippos, man. It's the best game you could possibly play.
Do you use an odd number of soccer balls for that? So if you have 4 teams, you wouldn't have 20 balls. You'd have like 23 or...
Yeah, you could do something like that, or you could add in some additional extras, like, if you've got different colored soccer balls, because no one ever has, 20 soccer balls which are the exact same, well, suddenly your red soccer balls
that's worth 10 points.
Your black soccer ball that your kids turned up, that's worth 10. So everyone's going to try and steal that one and forgets about the rest of them. So much fun. It's brilliant.
Cool. Pete, thanks a lot, mate. Have a great weekend. Appreciate your time.
Enjoy.